I know what. Um, I really don't know how to put myself into this. It's been a while since I've made a video. Um, but yeah, I'm going to talk about Gothic, and what that means. Um, we'll start as kind of always with a history lesson. The word Gothic, in terms of modern culture, refers originally to the subgenre of post-punk that emerged, emerged, emerged in the late 70s. Punk was birthed somewhere around the late 60s and the mid 70s. People argue that it's with the Damned's debut album, but that's only the first full-length punk album. The genre had been around for a while, for quite a while. So post-punk appears in the late 70s, and one of its multiple incarnations is Gothic rock. Just like with post-hardcore, there's math rock and emo and scrams, or emo at that time. Well, there's the same with post-punk. There's a lot of variants. There's more dub, reggae influenced stuff, and then there's Gothic rock, which is one of the most known variants of post-punk. It comes straight from proto-punk. Weirdly enough, it takes a lot more from um, the Stooges and Velvet Underground, especially, and it darkens everything up. It's a lot more thought than punk rock. Punk rock was fast and quick and simple, and not. It wasn't important to have a sense of harmony. It was more about the energy and the message than any sort of atmosphere, really. Meanwhile, goth rock or gothic rock lives with the atmosphere. Its whole concept is the atmosphere. We have a darker feeling. The bass isn't just the in between the beat in between part of between guitar and drums. It has more functions than that. It becomes a lead instrument sometimes. Uh, People play in a higher register on the bass. Um, Full chords are used. Intervals other than fifths. You have sixths and thirds used commonly. Sevenths becomes a little bit more complex in terms of harmony and, as I said, darker. They take a lot from Romanticism, which is the main 18th century movement in Europe, and they take a lot also from German Expressionism, which is a form of art from the early 20th century. You can mainly see it in movies like Nosferatu or Dr. Caligari. They have they follow that aesthetic. Um, they follow the concepts from Gothic literature, which is one of the artistic branches of the romantic movement. the 18th century, they take a lot from literature. They are people who read, who enjoy art, really. Um, well, punk has its own artistic merit, like its interest in Dadaism, for example. It's not something that people usually talk about, but it's true. Early punk has roots in the avant-garde in a way, and especially Dadaism. Meanwhile, Gothic rock and early Goths had an interest in literature and in dark, a dark aesthetic that could be found in mainly those two movements, Romanticism and German Expressionism. Um, so that's Gothic rock in its primitive form. Uh, from there, we go to maybe the late 80s, and so far Gothic rock has influenced a lot of bands and a lot of genres, but it's been just an influence. It hasn't had a full on subgenre in metal. In the early 80s, there was death rock and some of the first electronic gothic meldings, but it didn't go towards metal until maybe the late 80s, where bands like My Dying Bride and Funeral, Catatonia, bands like that took the post-punk, especially gothic rock aesthetic and music, and mixed it with doom metal mostly. Death doom, in the case of Catatonia, a little bit of black around there, not too much. And that creates gothic metal, which is that it's a really depressing sound. It's not as usually if you listen to gothic rock, it's usually a lot darker. There are depressing songs, there are depressing bands, but it's usually dark. With gothic metal, we go mostly to the depressive side of that, and that sets the difference between gothic rock and gothic metal most of the time. But because then we have bands like Type O Negative that, well, they are depressing. They were depressing at times. There was a pure post-punk sound. You could hear The Cure, and Joy Division, and Bauhaus in the way they played, and in the way they wrote music. Most of the time, it takes only few things from the genre, and you have Gothic Black, which is taking Gothic metal, straight up Gothic metal, not Gothic rock most of the time. Sometimes they do take Gothic rock. We have Opera 9, do take from Gothic rock, but most of the time it ends up coming from Gothic metal and mixing it with black metal. We have bands like the aforementioned Opera 9, Cradle of Filth, and there's the reason I make these videos and to make a history lesson. I will recommend a lot of bands, and I think it's important that people know about this, but the main reason is that the Goth and Gothic / Gothic label is misused a lot everywhere. You go around and call a metalhead a punk or a punk a metalhead, and people will freak out, really. But you go on, call a goth an emo, or an emo a goth, a goth, a metalhead, or a cyber, and it's widely accepted that that's true and that there's nothing to it. It's just a thing, and that's not true. Emos are influenced by goth at an extent, but emo music and fashion and culture are not in the same place um, with Gothic culture. They have lots of things in common, but so does metal. Metal has lots of things in common, and punk. Punk is the father of Gothic rock. It would birth it. Um, and you go around and people who don't listen to metal call anything metal or screamo or goth. And metalheads are angry about that, usually. But then metalheads proceed and call EBM, industrial, agrotech, things like that, goth, or say that goths are emo, things like that, and you can't argue with them with that most of the time because while it's false, they are victims of the same situation. They should be accepting of that. Most of the time, they don't care. They really don't care, and they will call anything that they don't like a certain thing, and they will throw it out there. But yeah, I will link a few bands and songs and albums, so that you can see specifically what it is. There are genres that have crossed over. Gothic metal is one example. Death rock ended up being punk and Gothic rock. So Gothic rock returning to its roots in a different way. Yes, there's electronic music. A lot of EBM and agrotech is related to Gothic music and Gothic culture, but it's not necessarily goth. And people don't seem to understand that. Marilyn Manson is not goth. It's closer to industrial, and industrial is not goth. It's a completely different thing. Industrial and punk appear around the same time. And while industrial has an influence on Gothic rock and Gothic music in general, it also does have an influence on metal. Not necessarily industrial metal, but a lot of metal bands wouldn't be there without industrial music. I will also link that. You can visually see the difference between a goth and an emo, and a metalhead and a punk. Sometimes it's harder. Sometimes people like to mix things up. I'm myself guilty of that, if you can say guilty about that. But yeah, I like to mix different styles in both my music and my attire, my way of looking. But if you see, for example, someone who is clearly an emo or clearly a goth, don't call them the other thing. It will only annoy them. And if you want to annoy them, then you are an idiot. You want to annoy people just to annoy people, and that's being stupid. That's being a child completely. Yeah. As always, links about everything in the description, and please be respectful of other cultures. You don't like it when people complain about what you do and the things you like. Don't do the same. Don't do things that you don't like to suffer. So yeah. Bye.